Awesome. Well, hello everyone and welcome to September's Tenant Talk Live. Again, today's topic will be on getting out the vote. And for those that are newer here, my name is Sid Betancourt and I use she, they pronouns. And I'm a project manager for inclusive community engagement at the Coalition. For folks who this might be your first time here, or if you need a refresher, this is Tenant Talk Live, where we provide opportunities for you all to get connected with one another, but also with NLIHC, share best practices, and learn how to influence federal housing policy and within your communities as well. This meeting is being recorded and is uploaded to YouTube afterwards. So in case y'all want to share any information, just be aware that there will be a recording of this posted online afterwards. We do have a few awesome guests today, but before I bring them on, I'll just do some brief announcements, beginning always with our community agreements. So I'll share my screen now so you can see that. So these were the agreements that the Tenant Talk Live audience came up with in January. The first one being the Platinum Rule, treating others the way they want to be treated. So just be considerate of how others want to be.
Did anybody in this group have anything to add?
And just how that might differ from how you want to be treated. And then this one, which is kind of relevant to what just happened, but just make sure to mute your mic except when you're speaking. Listening with an open mind and empathy, taking up space, but also remembering to give space to others. And then again, just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online afterwards. If y'all have any like additional guidelines or agreements that you would want to add to this, please feel free to email me afterwards. We'll drop my email in the chat for you to have access to. And then this is also a reminder that if you are signed up for NLIHC emails, you should be receiving an email this Friday called The Connection. This e-blast is going to have like recap materials from all NLIHC calls this week, including this one and our house call. And that'll include, for Tenant Talk Live in particular, the recording, the chat, the links, and all that stuff. And that'll go out again this Friday. You can sign up for those emails in the link that Gabby just dropped in the chat, but we also, you can view last month's recap materials in the link that we'll share in the chat shortly. And then just for some logistics, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll keep track of them as they come in. And again, just ask that you stay muted unless you're speaking, since there's a few of us in here. We want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak uninterrupted. But I'll introduce you to our guests today. So we have the lovely Sharon Underwood joining us from Texas. Sharon is currently a tenant advocate volunteer in Kingwood, Texas, and she started her journey with one of our state partners, Texas Housers, and where she was a Texas Houser Fellow. And currently she assists in helping tenants filing code violations and documenting them and making sure that tenants understand their rights. And her goal is to make sure that Texas tenants know their rights. And also joining us today, we have NLIHC's very own Courtney Cooperman, who is our project manager for the Our Homes, Our Votes initiative, which you will learn more about shortly. But she leads a lot of our nonpartisan efforts to register, educate, and mobilize low-income renters to vote, and making sure that housing is a big election issue across the country. But to get us started, I'll kick it off to Sharon, and I'll share your presentation shortly, Sharon, on my screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sydney. My name is Sharon Underwood, and I am a tenant in Kingwood, Texas, and I'll be talking briefly about why tenants should vote, or why tenants don't feel like their votes count. A lot of tenants feel that their votes are insignificant. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. And Our elected officials locally and nationally play a role in passing housing policies that affect us as tenants. Therefore, we should be concerned about who is elected into these positions, preferably officials that identify with our values and concerns and take us seriously. Tenants feel unheard when their concerns are not addressed. Concerns such as landlord behavior or misbehavior. Consistent abuse and retaliation makes tenants doubtful that anything will ever change. Our votes could put officials in place that will crack down on landlord abuse and neglect by better protecting and enforcing our rights as tenants. By coming together at the polls, there is strength in numbers, and we should never be afraid to exercise our rights. The next concern that tenants have is with code violations. Tenants should not fear retaliation for reporting code violations. We should not have to live with non-working air conditioning units, rats, mice, roaches, and mold. There are more of us than there are landlords. Our votes should send a message that we can show you better than we can tell you. The next concern a lot of tenants have is the eviction rates. Eviction rates are sky high across the country. All of us know someone facing eviction or have already been evicted. Some of these evictions could have been prevented with proper tools and knowledge and with better landlord oversight and accountability. Our votes could elect officials that would improve policies and regulate evictions, policies that will perhaps only allow landlords to evict in certain situations. And lastly, another concern that many tenants have is the out of control rent rates. I speak to people all the time who are afraid they will have to move to another place or have to live in their cars. And some are actually living in their cars. I met a young lady with 2 twin little girls, and she was telling me that how much her rent was going up, and it was astronomical. And she said she would not be able to afford it, and her only option that she could think of was sleeping in her car. And some tenants are moving in with friends and family members, and sometimes that's just not, it's just not good, because everybody wants their independence. And even in some the rents are sky high, even in some low income and tax credit properties. Our votes could help elect officials that would fight for more affordable housing, more rental assistance funding, and rent caps. It is more important now than ever that we get out to vote. Vote on officials that are blocking progress, vote out officials that are blocking progress, and vote in leaders that will implement more rental assistance programs, crack down on price gouging, and support the building of more affordable housing. In conclusion, next slide. Why our votes are important. Increasing voter turnout among renters could have dramatic implications on the outcome of elections. More affordable housing. The more of us that vote, the more likely we are to get someone in office that will support our building of affordable housing. Our votes could sway more tenant-friendly legislation. If our vote wasn't important, then why are there attempts to suppress them? In conclusion, we must make a joint effort to encourage our fellow tenants to vote. Think of the power we would have if we united at the polls. There are more of us than there are landlords. We could better advocate for better living conditions and lower rents. The powers that be would have to stand up and take notice that we are important, our votes are important, and that we are demanding change. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sharon. And I'll go ahead, before we get into Q&A, I'll turn it over to Courtney to also share some of her wisdom with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Sharon, for the inspiration and for really boiling it all down to the power that we have. So appreciate being in community and being here with you. As Sid mentioned before, I'm Courtney Cooperman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the project manager of NLIHC's Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. I'm so happy to be here on this evening's Tenant Talk Live to speak about nonpartisan voter and candidate engagement and how tenants can get involved with Our Homes, Our Votes to boost voter turnout in their communities, which, as Sharon just outlined, is so critical for building political power and achieving housing justice. We can go to the next slide. For those of you who might just be hearing about Our Homes, Our Votes for the first time, Our Homes, Our Votes is our nonpartisan initiative to boost voter turnout among low-income renters and to elevate housing as an election issue. The campaign empowers tenant leaders, advocates, direct services organizations, housing providers, really just anyone in the NLIHC network to register, educate, and mobilize voters in their communities. We know that you all have a lot on your plates as tenant leaders. So the goal of this campaign is really to increase your capacity to do nonpartisan election work without reinventing the wheel. And before I keep on going with this presentation, I just want to get a sense of everyone's level of familiarity with nonpartisan voter engagement. So could I ask everyone to either put a number in the chat or hold up a hand to describe your level of experience with nonpartisan voter engagement? You can put a 1 if this is your first time, your first conversation about voter engagement, a 5 if you have years of experience and could probably give this presentation instead of me, or anything in between if you feel like you're, you have some experience but are still in a learning mode. I'm seeing a mix, a lot of 2s, 3s, 4s. Dr. Bambi is of course a 5. Hi, Dr. Bambi. Okay, great. Well, my hope is that this presentation will have something for everyone, regardless of how much your experience you're coming in with. And if you're a 2 or a 3, you'll leave ready to be a 3 or a 4, and really be empowered by in this election season. We can go to the next slide. So again, these voter engagement activities and all of your role in voter engagement is really critical because renters, and especially low-income renters, face disproportionate barriers to voting and therefore tend to turn out to vote at lower rates. The same communities that face the greatest structural barriers to securing stable, accessible, affordable homes also face the greatest structural barriers to voting. These barriers can include less flexible work schedules, childcare needs, limited transportation options, and in some states, restrictive voter ID laws. Renters are also much more likely to move in between elections than homeowners. If someone changes their address, they need to update their voter registration, but this process isn't always made clear or accessible. And while people who are experiencing homelessness absolutely have the legal right to vote, this process of registering and voting without a current address is not always transparent or well understood. On top of all of these very concrete obstacles, low-income people and those who have historically been disenfranchised in the political process are often very justifiably skeptical that voting is worth their time, since they've seen elected officials fail to keep their promises year after year and experience these injustices. So these factors really all contribute to stark disparities in voter turnout between renters and homeowners, and an even greater gap between lower income and higher income people. As you can see on the graphs on the slide, in the 2022 midterm elections, just 37% of renters voted compared to 58% of homeowners, and 1/3 of the lowest income people voted compared to 2/3 of the highest income people. And as Sharon really outlined for us so powerfully, these disparities are really the key to understanding why elected officials don't prioritize policies that meet the needs of the lowest income people. Elected officials want to keep their jobs, so they're most incentivized to listen to their voters or their constituents that vote at the highest rates. These tend to be higher income people, these tend to be homeowners, and disproportionately, these tend to be white voters. These voter turnout disparities create a self-reinforcing cycle where policies don't meet the needs of the lowest income people, who in turn face these continued obstacles to achieving housing stability and to voting. Low voter turnout rates also cause political candidates to ignore low-income communities because they're less likely to put their campaign money into campaigning where people are less likely to cast their ballots. This means that low-income renters are less likely to even be asked for their vote, which leaves them on the sidelines of the political process all too often. So this all is a really devastating cycle. But I'm not here to be doom and gloom. We can go to the next slide. I'm not here to paint a picture of doom and gloom. I'm here to tell you that everyone here in this virtual room has the power to break this cycle. Tenant leaders are trusted messengers who can help their neighbors overcome obstacles to voting and encourage them to make their voices heard in the political process. We have research to back this up. When trusted, nonpartisan messengers reach out in communities that are less likely to cast their ballots, they can meaningfully increase voter turnout rates. And then when elected officials see higher turnout rates in a community, they're more likely to start paying attention to that community's priorities. We can go to the next slide. So now in a kind of concrete, what does this look like on the ground sense? What are some of the activities that you as tenants might choose to take on in this election cycle? Tenant leaders can really play an important role in every phase of a nonpartisan election campaign, from registering voters to holding elected officials accountable. And I'm just going to give a quick snapshot of some of these activities, but I highly recommend reading the latest edition of the Tenant Talk newsletter for a deeper dive on these and other activities. So just a sample of some of the work you might be interested in doing. You can offer voter registration forms at tenant association meetings, block parties, or other community events. You can post flyers with information about upcoming election deadlines in common spaces in your building. You can canvass door to door or make phone calls or send texts to remind your neighbors about upcoming elections. You can distribute information about the election protection hotline, which voters can call if they're turned away at the polls or face any form of harassment or intimidation. And again, that is just a snapshot. There's many more activities that you can do. We can go to the next slide. I also wanted to share some information specifically for those who are members of resident councils in public housing, because for those residents, there's official guidance from HUD on permissible forms of nonpartisan voter engagement. 3 years ago, the Biden administration issued an executive order on promoting access to voting, which encourages federal agencies to do everything within their existing legal authority to facilitate access to voter registration and encourage voting. HUD then followed up on this executive order with a message to public housing agencies affirming that they're not only permitted, but are actively encouraged to organize nonpartisan voter engagement activities. So if you're a public housing resident and you've reached out to your PHA about doing nonpartisan voter engagement, and they've been hesitant or said, no, we can't do that, you can actually point them to this executive order and tell them that it's fully within their mandate. And I'll drop the link to where we have archived all of that information. These announcements also specify that where PHAs fund resident councils, they can use funds to provide transportation to the polls as a resident service. So if you're with a resident council and that's something you're interested in doing, you should talk to your PHA about doing that. We can go to the next slide. These announcements from HUD name some specific ways that PHAs and other HUD-subsidized providers can encourage residents to vote. They can share nonpartisan voter and election resources with residents, permit the use of community space to hold meetings, nonpartisan candidate forums, and voter registration activities, and they can collaborate with local election administrators to use space for voter drop boxes and voting sites. Before I continue with the presentation, I just want to pause and ask another question. For any residents of public or HUD subsidized housing, have you seen any of these activities happening in your communities? Have your communities been doing nonpartisan voter engagement activities like the ones I've talked about here? You can share in the chat. Sharon says voter registration forms are on the table in the lobby, which is always a great start and a pretty easy lift if your community is hesitant. That's something that is a good starting place. I'm seeing a few no's. Our goal is to provide you the information and tools to change that. Monica says they're scheduled for a September 17th event and a couple in October. We'd love to hear that. Outreach pop-ups are great. Cool. Well, feel free to continue sharing these in the chat, and we can talk more about the types of activities that are happening or not happening when we get to the Q&A. For now, we can go to the next slide. So the fun part, again, is talking about all the activities that residents and PHAs can and should do. It's also important to touch upon the not so fun part about activities that you cannot do. So the first category of activities that PHAs and resident councils cannot do is anything that is partisan. This means you can't favor one candidate or political party over another in any way. This would include inviting one candidate to a forum or town hall without providing the equal opportunity for another to attend, advertising the importance of voter registration or voting to benefit one party or candidate over another, or using facilities for partisan activities like phone banking for a candidate rather than nonpartisan activities like just reminding people about voting. You also can't give the impression that benefits are connected to a resident's voting activity or do anything that indicates that voter registration and voting are not voluntary. So for example, you cannot host an election night party and only invite or offer rewards to residents who voted. You can host a party, but you can't limit the invitations to people who voted. Cool, we can go to the next slide. So this election season also creates a really powerful opportunity to elevate housing in the political conversation and push our elected officials to prioritize proven solutions to housing instability and homelessness. Engaging with candidates while they're running for office can really lay the groundwork for effective advocacy and holding candidates accountable. For example, if a candidate promises that they'll increase funding for vouchers, and then later on you're meeting with them, let's say at NLIHC's Capitol Hill Day, you can say, hey, look, you campaigned to increase funding for vouchers. You should support a federal budget that expands funding for vouchers. So it can really make you a stronger advocate. Candidate engagement can also reinforce your voter education and get out the vote work by making the stakes of the election more concrete and visible for communities, which can motivate people to participate. So if you have the candidates speaking to your community, sharing their visions for affordable housing and tenant protections, they can kind of see where does each candidate stand and feel like my vote's going to make an impact in terms of who we elect and what they'll do in office. We can go to the next slide. So this edition of Tenant Talk has a whole article on ways to engage candidates as a tenant or resident. I'll just give a very brief snapshot of them here. Again, I recommend reading the full article if this is something you're interested in doing. So tenants can host nonpartisan candidate forums in their buildings where you invite all of the candidates running for a specific office to speak and answer residents' questions. If you don't have the capacity to host a candidate forum of your own, that's okay. Consider attending another organization's candidate forum and asking a question. Organizations like the League of Women Voters will often organize candidate forums, and many of our NLIHC state and tribal partners are also involved with candidate forums. So get in touch with us if you're looking to find a candidate forum in your community. You can also invite candidates to community events that are already taking place, like a block party or a picnic. You can issue a nonpartisan candidate questionnaire, where candidates provide written responses to questions developed by your community members. Then once the candidates respond, you can circulate those responses to educate your neighbors about the candidates' stances. Tenants can also influence candidates and shape the public debate during election season by writing letters to the editor in their local papers or posting on social media and tagging the candidates. And we can go to the next slide. Now, if you're feeling inspired to get started with nonpartisan voter and candidate engagement or take this to the next level in your community, but you're not exactly sure where to start, you are in the right place. NLIHC's Our Homes, Our Votes campaign has an abundance of resources and networks that you can get involved with to shape your nonpartisan voter and candidate engagement activities. We have a very comprehensive online resource library at ourhomes-ourvotes.org, where you can find template resources and tips for all the activities that we just talked about. We also have a bi-weekly webinar series, which provides deeper dives into voter and candidate engagement for housing advocates and tenant leaders. We have our next webinar next Monday, September 16th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and that will be on the topic of nonpartisan voter education. And I'll drop that link in the chat where you can sign up. We can go to the next slide. We also have a new online voter registration and information tool called TurboVote. This is a one-stop shop where you can register to vote, check your registration status, sign up for election reminders, and find nonpartisan election information for your community. Everything on the page is available in both English and Spanish. So I encourage you to take a second to check it out and spread the word to your community members who might not be registered to vote at their current address. You can find this at ourhomes.turbovote.org or by scanning the QR code here. I will put that link in the chat as well. Great. We can go to the next slide. Our Homes, Our Votes also has a network of affiliates, which are nonpartisan organizations that are committed to carrying out the goals of this campaign. We have a number of tenant associations that are part of the affiliates network, and if your tenant association isn't yet a part of it, I encourage you to join. We have a listserv for affiliates where we share announcements and opportunities related to nonpartisan voter engagement. We have regular office hours where you can workshop voter and candidate engagement plans, and we'll have a post-election virtual gathering for affiliates to celebrate you and thank you for all of your work. So I'll drop the link where you can learn more and sign up to become an affiliate. We can go to the next slide. I encourage everyone to celebrate voter participation with new Our Homes, Our Votes swag. We have that available on nlihc.myshopify.com. So distributing this sort of swag is a really fun way to share voter registration information in your community. We have a set of magnets that actually have the QR code to TurboVote. So if you want to get voter registration out in a kind of fun way, doing those magnets can be a little more exciting than just giving out another form. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested, and all the swag is available in both English and Spanish. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you all for your enthusiasm. I'll start taking a look through the comments in the chat, and I'm looking forward to taking questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Courtney. I feel you got a lot of questions while you were giving the presentation, so I'm excited to get through them with you guys. Let me just pull them up really fast. Awesome. Some of them were already answered in the chat too, but we can answer them out loud too for the folks that are watching this back on YouTube afterwards. But Jennifer, and hello Jennifer, one of our frequent Tenant Talk Live guests was kind of asking about some USPS issues, how mail theft has skyrocketed from within apparently, and packages should arrive within days, usually take longer. And that situation and how that can be a concern for places that do use mail-in ballots, and how they can possibly be counted. I don't know if you had any thoughts, Sharon
Yeah.
or Courtney, that you wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, mail-in balloting is proven to be a very safe way to cast your ballot. And USPS does put additional resources into mail processing and handling as the election gets closer. That being said, we completely understand that it's not the best option for everyone. You may be in a state that has mail ballot drop boxes. So rather than sending it in, putting it in the, sending it off to USPS, you can actually put it directly in a drop box that will go straight to the election office and not have to go through USPS. Or if that doesn't feel like the best option for you, in-person voting is always available. And many states now offer early voting. So if you're concerned about having a long line at your polling place, or being in a crowded polling place, or not available to go to the polls on election day, I recommend looking into in-person early voting as an alternative to mail-in voting. But that being said, mail-in voting is considered to be very, very safe and effective, and the USPS does put additional resources into processing in the lead up to the election. And also, one more comment on that is the earlier you submit your mail-in ballot, the better, in terms of resolving those issues and not facing that concern about the ballot getting lost in the mail.
Excuse me, could I make a comment? Or I don't want to take up your time, but Louis DeJoy, the CEO of the post office, postmaster general, I guess it is, he's been promising these things for months, that he's going to take care of this. I'm situated in Houston, Texas. We have a ton of mail theft here at a couple of the facilities here. You can Google it. It's, I've got, but we're not the only one. Like, Montpelier is the capital of Vermont. They had a flood about a year ago. Their post office has not been replaced. Some people think there's an agenda attached to that. I know that, like, I've had a couple of pieces. I do crafts on the side, but I'm not doing my usual job. I've had a couple of pieces stolen in the mail. I waited for literally a month to get, a couple other things delivered. Normally it's just a couple of days. So everyone be careful. And when they promise something, it seems, I'm sorry, I don't normally. It's important to track down and see how accurate that is, because they've been stringing people along for a long time now. And it's about to, I don't trust the intentions of certain people. And, we don't want the election affected by, oops, I didn't know, I couldn't help it. There is no responsible adult around. Anyway, I'm sorry, this old bag's 2 cents. I will shut up and get out of here.
No, don't apologize. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And again, we'll continue to monitor things that are coming out and any concerns. And we do every other week, we do an Our Homes, Our Votes update in NLIHC's memo. So as information comes out about mail-in voting that might be relevant for all of you, we'll include those in our bi-weekly memo updates.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer. All valid concerns. Let me see. The next one I had on deck was some folks really talked about like different like types of positions that are involved in the election process. The first one being like an election judge. Would either of you know like what an election judge is or does? And if you don't, we did have somebody answer it in the chat as well, and they're welcome to answer if they'd like. I can't remember who it was though. I think it was
me.
yes. Yeah,
I
think
used to
it's Karen.
work the election polls.
Yeah,
I did
feel
for
free to
like,
share more, Karen, if you'd like.
I did 2014, 2016 primary general elections. And I did the best at provisional voting. The voting table where people that aren't registered or whatever their special circumstance might be. That's a special table where you have to, go through all these different little tiny steps. Well, anyways, then there's people that when you go in, there's a machine, what they call poll books. You give them your name, down there in Maryland, you give your year and day of birth, no. Month and day of birth, that's it. They don't want your year, okay? Unless there's like two that come up in the poll book. But anyway, they try to keep it as, private as possible. But in Maryland, they don't require voter ID. That's one of my pet peeves. So anyways, I gotta keep my mouth shut and just go, roll with the punches. That's why I just like to do provisional voting and not get involved in all the other stuff. But anyways, there's the poll book, and then what happens is you give your information, they give you like a card usually. And then you go get and most of them are paper ballots now that you go to a private area to, write in what your votes are, and then you put it into the scanning machine, and there's always someone to vote, supervise it every step of the way. And there's always a chief judge that's on the floor in case anything goes awry. And now I noticed since I left there, I used to only get 150 for the day. Now they're pushing 250 in Montgomery County like they did in PG County. And the chief judges are getting paid even more so because people are leaving. Now, when I was there, I used to, before the election day, I used to go to the restaurants with a letter from the Board of Elections canvassing for meals to be donated because it's a long ass day when you can't go outside of there for the sake of the integrity of the election. So, there's just little things I used to do. But unfortunately, in the general election of 2016, it's been 2 years since I did the provisional. It takes me 2 or 3 situations, and then I've got it. Well, this particular person, unfortunately, I think it's from she was sent there by someone at the actual office. She was a roamer. Roamers are in charge of like 5, 6, or 7 polling places. So I think this one's in charge of 6. So if you take from 7 in the morning till 8 at night, that's 13 hours. If you divide 6 polling places into that, it's just over 2 hours each. She was at our particular place for 3 hours, just, nitpicking at every little thing of mine. And she wouldn't even let the chief judge that I worked well with, that knew me and my, learning disability issues and everything. She got mad at the chief judge that would sit beside me and pick up on things until till it came naturally. Well, anyways, I'll admit, I got flustered. I left because I was basically being hammered because of my disability issue. And I thought to myself, I am not here doing my civic duty to get beat on because of my disability. And the reason I did this stuff was to see just what went on behind, the table. When you go in to vote, I wanted to see what went on the other side of the table. And boy, did I have my eyes opened. And I'm still very tired from all that.
Thanks for sharing, Karen, and appreciate your service as an election judge. It really, people like you make our democracy run smoothly, and I'm sorry that the experience had those aspects, those negative
Well,
aspects.
see, let me add this one little caveat. In 94, I think it was a primary, I think. Someone from the State Board of Elections came in just off, out of the clear blue, and she randomly selected polling places to quiz them, okay? She quizzed the people that were doing the poll books and quizzed the people that are standing by, the place where you make, like now you fill in the circles. And she quizzed all these people what their jobs were. Then she came to me, the provisional table. She goes, here, I have a provisional ballot. Show me the steps that you go through. And I showed her step by step by step by step. She says, perfect, that's what I want. And she walked off with her head held high. But yet in 2016, the other chief judge tried to say that I couldn't do my job. But it really sucks having a disability that you can't see. But anyways, that's just my opinion.
Thank you for sharing, Karen. We really do appreciate it though. Yeah, and I think the other question related to to kind of like election like positions, I guess, was Dr. Bambi, who also mentioned that she was a deputy registrar. I don't know, Dr. Bambi, if you want to share a little bit more about your experience. I know you did in the chat, but if you have a few seconds.
Yes, I do. Yes, I can. A deputy registrar, I am that in two counties in Georgia, Fulton County as well as Clayton County. And you have to go through a mandatory training session. Sometimes they'll do it in person, sometimes they'll do it via Zoom. And you are the person that they are deputizing or entrusting to handle those voter registration forms. So you have to go through the training, you have to be a registered voter, and they do check that. And you have to sign an oath stating that you will be nonpartisan. I cannot stress that enough, nonpartisan. And then you are able to conduct events, voter engagement events. And mostly it's tabling or getting people registered to vote. But you have to make sure that they complete the voter registration form correctly. If you are collecting those voter registration forms, you must keep them secure because they do have sensitive information on there, and you have to return those voter registration forms to the election office in a timely manner. And the real estate term that we use is as soon as possible. So if you have something like at maybe 4 o'clock p.m., try to get there by 5 to drop them off, or the very next morning. So that's very important, making sure that those forms are filled out correctly and kept secure. That is extremely important. So that's kind of what a deputy registrar does, but it does require training, and you have to execute and sign an oath. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bambi. And yeah, Karen is getting some love in the chat too, so we love to see that. There's one more question that I had from the chat, but if anybody else has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand on the Zoom as well. With the Zoom feature, I might not be able to see everybody if you raise your hand, so just use the Zoom feature. But I think Monica asked, can someone experiencing homelessness run for office? And we've talked about this, I think, like in other webinars as well, but Courtney or Sharon, if you'd like to share, I can also share some of my thoughts too.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, and there are examples of people experiencing homelessness or who have experienced homelessness in the past that have run for office and won, including Congresswoman Cori Bush. She is not unhoused while in office in Congress, but has experienced homelessness. And people who are currently unhoused can run and win as well.
And Sharon, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but
No.
awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's a resounding yes, or resounding yes for me, because I think that it's like really important to make sure that folks who are like impacted by the policies that are being implemented are like actually being a part of like creating them, implementing them, and enforcing them. So at any level of government, it's important. I don't see any other questions.
I see
from
one from
chat.
Jennifer that I wanted to
Oh, yes.
uplift. Jennifer asked if there's a number to call if we witness or hear questionable stuff at the polls, like polls in certain neighborhoods that only have one working machine. And yes, there is an election protection hotline. It's operated by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. So a very reputable, nonpartisan organization. They have a website and they have hotlines that you can call in a number of different languages. So definitely save their number in your phone, share their number with your community members. You can even text them. So that's where I'd recommend reaching out.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. And I did really quickly before we like log off, Courtney did share that we do have like a new tenant talk publication that just came out. And I want to share that in the chat with you guys if you want to read the digital version. Did somebody else unmute that I just totally missed? I'm so sorry. I think it might have been Sharon Hill. Were you trying to say something? No? Okay.
No, but I thank you all for this. Definitely.
No worries.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you. We just wanted to make sure that you were good. I did want to share that I put it in the chat earlier, but if you want to read the digital version, I just dropped that in the chat. It just came out this last Thursday. And we are let me see if I can get to it, but we are doing physical copies of that as well if you would want to sign up to receive a physical copy for that. Ooh, I should have had it on hand. I don't have it on hand right now, but it will be let me get it for you because it's actually closing this Thursday. But we'll put it in the chat for you guys before the end of this call. And Sharon actually has an article that has been included in there where she got to share a little bit about her experience doing advocacy in Texas. And for folks who had questions earlier about like what can residents and tenants do for election engagement, like that will have like more detailed articles on things that you can do and ways that you can like follow up with us if you have any further questions about that. And yeah, are there any folks who have any other questions that we can share with our guests today? I do have one question then, and this one's for Sharon. If you don't mind being put on the spot, Sharon, if you could share a little bit more about like your experience like doing voter engagement like in your area, and any like challenges or lessons learned that you would like to share with the group as well.
Well, the main challenge I have is tenants saying that their vote does not count. They're tired of voting. The same old things are happening and nothing is changing. And that's the biggest issue that I have is encouraging them that if we all unite and everybody get together and vote, then we can make a change. We can't stop. Just because it seems like we're losing, we cannot stop. We have to keep fighting. And our housing is something to fight for. And that's how they want us to feel. They want us to feel like nothing is going to happen. And that's one way to keep us from going to the poll. Well, nobody's going to stop me from going to the poll. I don't care if for the last 50 years, nothing has changed, nothing has happened. I'm going back to the poll one more time. You're going to see my face at the poll every time until you decide that my vote is important. And I'm going to take people with me. And I make phone calls. I talk to people that I see. And like when they're doing code violations, I encourage them to make sure that they vote. Again, I don't tell them who to vote for, but just to make sure that they vote. And for senior citizens, mainly, I try and make sure that they get the vote by mail applications. I hope that answered the question.
No, it definitely did. Thank you so much, Sharon. And you're getting some love in the chat as well. Okay, I think.
Thank you.
And then Karen, I'll follow up with you, but we'll have like the chat and everything included in our follow-up email, so it'll have everything in there. Anything that we share, we will be included in that follow-up email. Cool. A lot of good discussion in the chat today too. I don't see any other questions. If y'all see any other questions that I missed, please feel free to let me know. I think Karen, I saw, yeah.
No, I said that because this is my dominant arm. I'm gonna be like this for a few months at least. I'm not gonna be able to do anything with my hands.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll have the recap
and
material.
all because there's no accessible one-bedroom affordable housing where I'm living.
Yeah, see, it's all connected. It's literally
Oh,
all.
you should have heard me last night. I was at an affordable housing meeting, okay, in my town. And the place where I was living, I just moved in July. She happened to be there, okay? And at the end, they gave, opportunity for comments. And I basically said, I've been fighting this battle for about 5 years now with this borough about the need for accessible one-bedroom affordable housing that is not age restricted. And now the joke is on me. Now I have to undergo rotator cuff surgery because I fell down some narrow, steep steps that my feet couldn't even fit on. And I went down like a belly flop, and my leg and my ankle went like this, and that's not supposed to happen. And little did I know, when I reached out, I messed up my rotator cuff, what they call a total thickness tear or something like that. And that has to be repaired because there was no accessible, affordable one-bedroom housing where I'm living for,
Karen,
people.
didn't something
Yeah.
happen to you before the conference last year too? Because I remember there was some kind of issue. You had something with your leg or something,
Oh
I
yeah,
thought.
that was it.
Yeah. I
I'm still reeling from it
wow. Wow. I remember that
because
because
there's not any
we were trying to find a way to get
accessible,
to the conference.
affordable one-bedroom housing where I'm living. This is my crusade. I'm sorry for the passion, but hey.
No, the passion's good. Somebody in the chat said defensive necessity, but I'm not going to say anything, but feel free to take the information and do as you will. But I did find the link to sign up for a tenant talk, like physical copy. So if you guys want we have a limited amount of free copies of those, and so once we reach the cap, we'll stop taking entries. But I'll just drop that in the chat right now so you can get one of those if you're interested. And it'll close this Thursday at the end of the day. I wish we could do this every day too, Jeff. It is one of my favorite part of my job. But yeah, that's all I have for y'all today. Thank you to Courtney and for Sharon for joining us today, and for everyone who hopped on to listen and to talk. Our next call for this season is going to be on October 7th, 2024. You can register for that at the link that Gabby just put in the chat. Thank you, Gabby. Next month, I'm also hoping to have a survey ready for y'all to take. It's our like annual end of the year survey where you get to share your thoughts on what you want to see next year, what you don't want to see next year, what we can do better, and what you like about the current calls right now. So just get the ideas rolling now. And then if you want to stay involved in the work that Courtney shared more about today with our Homes Our Votes, feel free to visit their website as well and learn more about that. We'll share all of the links that Courtney also shared in the recap email this Friday. And as always, we're always looking for blog post authors for NLIHC's On the Homefront blog. So if you're interested in sharing more about your story or any federal housing advocacy that you would want to have published there, feel free to email our outreach or our field team at outreach@nlihc.org. And then for folks who are here last month, we talked about the National Tenant Bill of Rights. We're still accepting endorsements. They can be from individual folks, they can be from organizations. we're open to any endorsements, and you can read that tenant bill of rights and endorse it at the link that we'll drop in the chat. And please don't forget to join our Facebook page so y'all can interact with each other after this. And as always, feel free to reach out to me if you ever have any questions or anything. But we'll see you on October 7th. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, thank you.